Good evening to you all. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. Sorry. And it's always a pleasure to have all of you with us on our wonderful Kraado sessions. Tonight, we are discussing data engineering with June Seif. I get to talk about her more in very few minutes. But then we'd like you to engage with us on our social media platforms. If you haven't followed us or liked us. So before we start the session, I'd like to talk about what Kraado is. Kraado is a gamified platform that validates your skills that you pick from school or from, learning on your own. And we just help you gain projects like internships, coaching opportunities, just so you can validate these skills. So if you are a student or an early graduate and you are seeking a channel to up your game, to validate your skill, I would recommend Kraado to you. You get to build experience and confidence with us. Who do we have with us tonight? Our brilliant speaker, we have June Seif. She is a data engineering manager at PEG Africa, and PEG Africa runs in many different countries in Africa. So June definitely has that international or within Africa outlook. She has worked for over a decade as a data engineer, so she definitely has earned this platform. She has so much experience to share. June's experience spans across global tech organizations in various industries. So talk about Fintech, she's there, Telco integrations, social enterprises, she's there. So yes, I think we do have a very wonderful speaker with us, and I'm sure she has a lot for us tonight. Hello, June. Good evening and welcome to our session for the very first time.
Thank you so much, Stefan. It's a pleasure, and I'm really honored to be here, and I'm so grateful to actually see the turnout of people that we've actually gotten to have today. Something that I didn't add there about myself, I'm actually a fraternal twin. I have a twin brother who doesn't look anything like me. We are completely two different people, but we're twins.
That's really
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
So June, once again, thanks for being with us.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to leave the floor to you. Just give us what you got.
Okay, great. So we definitely have a presentation that's out and prepared that I believe, Stefan, I don't know if you'll run it through or I'm going to run it. I don't know what the arrangement is around the slides.
Yeah, you could share your screen if
I can share my screen.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, that's good. That's good. So I'll definitely do that. So I'll definitely put out the presentation in a short while. So basically today the conversation is around data engineering, but I'd also like to put it as it's not only going to be data engineering. I think we'll talk a bit more also in complex, like how do you identify and find your space within the data career? Because right now, as many of you are aware, the data side of technology is really, really growing and booming a lot. I'm sure if you're people who look into job descriptions in different platforms, you'll definitely see there are a lot of companies looking for data experts. Either they're looking for data analysts, they're looking for data scientists, they're looking for data engineers, they're looking for machine learning engineers. So it's definitely an area within the tech field that's really booming. And if it's an area that you show interest in, I can definitely say that it's going to be a rewarding career for you, because bit by bit, as we're moving into artificial intelligence, that means that data is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So I'll go into the presentation. Let me just get my screen. Let me go, give me a minute. I'm on the machine here. That doesn't look like it. There's no future. Okay. Found it. Okay, good. Just put it in presentation mode. Okay, just give me a minute to get set up. I want to share my screen. I'll have to share a window. Great. Let me know if you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can actually see your screen.
Okay, great. So basically this presentation, I themed it the data journey, because one thing I believe is that as much as the conversation was meant to only focus on data engineering, I'm sure there are people who could be on this call who are trying to either find their way into a data career path, or thanks, Alfred. I'm sure there are people who are either probably trying to find their way into a career path, or maybe they're within the data field and they're trying to find where is my niche and where do I need to get into. That's why I call it the data journey. So a little bit about myself there. As they introduced me, I am June Seif. Those are my specialized skills that I've acquired over the years of my experience. I did my undergraduate course where I studied computer science and a business major. And then I took a bit of pivot and decided also to study organizational development and leadership. This was mainly to just grow also my business acumen, because I was pretty much a very technical person. So it was very, very beneficial to me. And for the industry experience, as you've seen, I've been in the telco world for I probably say for now close almost 8 or 10 years. Not directly, but I've worked a lot with telco partnerships from the start of my career. And then the fintech technology, the renewable energy industry, which is where I'm currently at with PEG. And yeah, technology for impact is also something I've been a part of for actually a very long time. I consider that I've been part of it for a long time because I was part, I think, of the first tech group of women in Kenya. That time, it's called Akira Chicks. I think some of you might be aware of it, but it was one of the first tech women communities that we actually had in Kenya, and I'd probably say even within East Africa. I don't know if it was in Africa, but at least within that time. And I believe all our tech communities are actually technology for impact spaces, because they actually are driving impacts within our communities. So I'll go straight into the presentation. I think we'll skip this for now. Yeah, so we'll start here. So I'll begin from what I call the data genesis. In the beginning was. So I like to give a bit of background of how data has evolved over the years. So I went and did some research, and I found that the whole conversation around databases and how to like aggregate data started in 1960. Of course, it started with IBM, because if you read about the history of computers, IBM was like one of the first leaders around the technical field. And then afterwards, of course, came Macintosh, which is commonly known right now as Apple. And then you have Microsoft, which came on the way. And then there are other many, many more technologies that came in. So IBM was one of the first institutions that was able to set up something that would look something close to a database. And what they created at that time was called what they call an integrated data store. And then as you transition on forwards, you find that in 1990, we started having the introduction of relational databases, which many of you refer to as SQL, Structured Query Language. And then as we moved on into 2000, we now started having the conversations around NoSQL. For those who might have interacted with NoSQL platforms like Mongo, started coming in. And NoSQL mainly focused on things to do with unstructured data like logs, or just data that is not in a way that you can easily tell what is happening. And then now, as we moved into 2010, and now we're in 2020, a decade later, the conversation around big data started coming, and increased awareness around it started growing. So I tried to show this to basically show you how data has evolved over the years. And if I was to give my own background, if there's anyone in this call who probably was in university like 10 or 15 years ago, for most of us who studied computer science or computer engineering at that time, the only course we were taught in data was databases, which were relational databases, and simply how to just write a SQL query and probably how to do an entity relational diagram. That's the most we learned about data. There was no data engineering, there was no data science. All those big names that you hear right now did not exist. And also for most organizations at that time, data was not really being explored as it is being explored today. Most companies just stored data in a database. In some companies, even databases were not being used. Then people would either store the information in an Excel sheet and just do very, very basic reporting. And even the rise of these open source tools that you hear, like now the way we have MySQL and Postgres, those are things that did not even exist then. I think most companies then that had databases were probably big enterprise companies, which you'd either find they could afford to buy things like Oracle, or they could afford to have, IBM has a database called DB2. Some of them were using the IBM database, or they would use the MS SQL, which was the Microsoft database. And you'd only find that in very established companies. So that's how fast structured data went to. It was just simply a database where you pull information and do basic reporting. And then this is how it's going currently. We have evolved right now in the big data space, and we're beginning to have now this kind of terms coming in: data engineering, data science, machine learning, which we'll go a bit more deeper into as we continue the presentation. So I want to talk a bit around what I call a data team. So when you think about data, most people only think about data science. But you know, data science is just an aspect of data. It's not the only thing that exists in the data world. So if you go right now to a bit more established organizations which have been able to figure out how to handle their data and how they intend to use their data, you'll find that they have a fully fledged setup data department. And if that institution is really, really set up well and it has structure, you'd find that there's an entire data team. And inside that data team, you'll find there's a product manager, a data analyst, a data engineer, a data scientist, an ML engineer, an ML ops, or maybe a system reliability engineer. So ideally, a standard or a structured organization with a proper data department would have this. But the reality for most of our institutions is that most of our institutions don't have a data department. At least for most substandard organizations, they'll just probably have an analytics person, and that's how far it goes. So like I said, the typical data team would consist of the following roles, and the roles could go beyond this. These are just a few of that I felt I wanted to highlight, since they are quite common and quite standard in most teams. So now we get into the journey. Which data professional are you? Or which data professional do you envision yourself being? Or which data professional do you want to see yourself as? So I wrote something there that said, the data universe is expanding rapidly. It's time we started recognizing just how big this field is, and that working in one part of it doesn't automatically require us to be experts of all. So one of the questions I usually get sometimes when I meet different people in different circles is, I've had someone once tell me, June, I want you to make me a data scientist. Yeah, which sounded hilarious. Or I want to be a data scientist. I want to be a data analyst. I want to be a data engineer. You know, like people keep mentioning these words, and sometimes people think that data science is data engineering or data engineering is data analytics. But as you keep delving more into these different names, all these names have got different functions. And the reality, like we said, the data universe is expanding rapidly. And it's not, ideally, you won't be able to fit in all of these roles. But if you find yourself, let's say, for example, in a startup organization where they're still trying to figure out what structures do we need to do, it's possible that you might find yourself having to do all those roles that I listed there. You may end up being the data scientist, the data engineer, the machine learning engineer, and all those other roles fitted in one, just simply because the organization is starting up and they're trying to find their niche in terms of how they want to be structured. But as the organization begins to find structure and become more organized, you'll find that those different roles that I listed there start having a clear scope. And now you'll need to probably move into more of a specialized role. So the first role that I listed there is a product manager. So yeah, you can be in that and end up being a product manager in data. So ideally, what would the product manager within the data aspect do? Their goals will be to make sure that the team is building the right thing, because there are different data products you can create. It could be an artificial intelligence tool. It could be a machine learning a program. It could be a predicative tool you're building within data science. And so this product manager, primarily, their responsibility will be to make sure that these products are created and that they are meeting the needs of the business, just like any other product manager will do in any other role. The only thing with you being a data product manager is that you need to have an eye for data. So you won't just be like any other product manager who creates software. You need to really have an awareness of what the data is. You need to have that business acumen, understanding of what that data is, so that you can actually be able to translate those business requirements into steps or procedures that the engineers or the scientists you're working in are able to understand that this is what we're trying to create. So product managers typically would probably ask questions like, is this feature important to us? For example, do we really need this predicative tool that is predicting how many of our customers are likely to default on their loan? Is this an important problem for us to solve? You know, those types of questions. So if you're someone who is more driven towards this way of working and you like to connect the bits of requirement gathering and trying to create, asking these analytical and critical questions, you can be in the data field and you can find yourself in a product manager role within the data field. And then we move also to data analyst, which is quite common within the data space. And data analysts simply discover insights in the data and then explain the findings to other people. That's pretty much what a data analyst does. So if you're someone who's interested in asking questions like, what kind of data does the company have? How do I get, so what does a data analyst need to know? Sorry, they will need to know what kind of data the company has. How do they get that data? How do they interpret the results? And how do they explain the findings to their colleagues and management? An example would be, if, for example, you're a data analyst who's dealing with reporting on sales, you will need to first of all find out, where does that sales data exist? How can I retrieve it? most likely you'll be expected to have SQL skills, so for you to be able to retrieve that data. And then the business is expecting that you'll be able to interpret why the numbers look the way they look. Like why did we have more sales on Monday and not on Tuesday? You know, and why did we have more customers churning in January and not in December? You know, those types of questions. If you're someone who's intrigued and interested in handling data in this aspect, then a data analyst role is what would be perfect for you. So what does a data analyst require? They require to have very good SQL skills. Yes, you must polish your SQL skills if you want to be a data analyst. In addition to that, you should get yourself familiarized with BI dashboards like Tableau, Looker, Power BI, because remember that one of the things that an analyst does is that they discover insights. And the BI tools are business intelligence tools which give you insights. So again, those are tools you want to familiarize yourself with if you want to get into the data analytical space. And then you need to have some basic statistics. You don't need to have in-depth, but at least you need to know things like, how do I calculate a mean? How do I calculate average? You know, how do I measure rolling rates? You know, basic, just statistical calculations. And then also how to run experiments. One of the things that you require as a data analyst is that you need to be a critical thinker. So you always want to try and explore, how does this work? Is this great, or should I take this option? So you need to always be checking, how can I compare and match and see how my results look like. A bit of machine learning would be great, and that would be more maybe on things to do with regressional analysis, time series modeling, rolling rates. Very basic calculations would be an added advantage to you, because again, as the world keeps on moving at the pace that it's moving, if you want to compete at the global standard, then you don't want to just be an ordinary data analyst. You want to be an extraordinary data analyst. So those are skills that you can pick. So I'll move on to the next one quickly. And I think this one is for everyone. Data science. It's the one word that is buzzing around town, right? This is the buzzword in everyone's mouth today. I want to be a data scientist. Companies are out there running and saying, we are looking for data scientists. So today I want to burst people's bubble a bit. So I wrote something that was quite interesting. It was a conversation I was having with someone. An ex-academician was once asked, what challenges are you tackling at the moment? So let's assume this ex-academician is a professor in statistics and maths, and he was employed to this big bank. Let's consider this bank, let's say, is Absa Bank. And he was asked, what challenges are you tackling at the moment? And his response was, it looks like I've been hired as a chief data scientist at a company that has no data. Data science does not make any sense without data. So the thing is that one of the things I find interesting through my experience is I interact sometimes with different people, different industries, and you meet different industry leaders. And when you mention the word data, they're like, oh my God, I want a data scientist, because it's such a nice word to have and it's such a nice title to have. But when you go and you dig into the organization, you find, first of all, they don't have data. Or even if they have the data is not in a way that it can be used to perform data science experiments. So you come in, you've been given this big role, maybe you're the data science lead, and you know, it sounds really fancy and all that, but you get into that organization and you realize, one, they don't have a way in which they collect their data. Their data is scattered all over the place. So the question I'll probably ask is that, do you think you will still be performing data scientist functions if you really got into that role? Let's hold that thought. So data science is the discipline of making data useful. It helps answer the how question, which is majorly focused on predicting the future. How likely are the set of customers to default on their loan? The reason we refer to it as a discipline of making data useful is because majority of the data being used is based on past events. So you are pretty much applying data science principles to infer the value that the kind of data would bring to your institution. Meaning that data science is an aftermath role. So I'm just going to share an experience of myself quickly, having worked in a startup. So when I joined PEG was talking about having a data science and coming up with data science roles. But when I walked in, one of the things that I observed is, one, they didn't have enough data. That was the first thing, because for you to run predictive analytics, you need to have a lot of data that you can be able to build patterns on that can be able to predict something. So for example, if you've just been selling your products for 2 months, there's no way you're going to be able to predict how you're likely to run out of what? Out of stock. Because you've just been selling for 2 months. You've not been able to establish a behavior. You've not been able to establish a habit. You've not even been able to observe within your data what are the common variables that I need to pick out to be able to predict that this is how my data will behave. So you actually begin to realize that if you're going to formulate a data department within your organization, a data scientist role is actually probably going to come into your department maybe after a year or 2 years. You'd probably need, let's not get there yet, but let's see how that's going to happen. Let's move to the next slide. The data engineer. So if I was going to set up a data department, the first person I will need in that department is a data engineer. Because if data science is the discipline of making data useful, then you can think of data engineering as the discipline of making the data usable. So you will need a data engineer in your department first, because the data engineer is going to help you to collect the data from the various sources. They will either process it from your SQL database or your NoSQL database, or from your Excel sheet or wherever else you're storing your data. The data engineer is going to pull this data together for you. They are going to process and transform this data for you and make it usable. And then once they're able to transform and clean this data for you, then now you can proceed and give the data scientist and tell the data scientist, voila, behold your data. You can now use it to create your predicative analytics and build your different statistical models around it. Data engineers, this is how I put data engineers. I usually say that data engineers are the heroes who provide behind the scenes infrastructure. One of the things sometimes when you go into established institutions, you tend to find that the data scientists and the data engineers don't work together. And for some reason, data scientists, that's just my observation, tend to feel that they are better than data engineers. But you can't be a successful data scientist without a data engineer. You need a data engineer for the data engineer to create for you useful data that you can be able to create meaningful analytics and models out of it. So that's why I say that data engineers are the heroes who provide behind the scenes infrastructure support that makes machine logs and data stores compatible with data science toolkits. So what would the data engineering role involve? It will involve enabling data storage, for example, data warehouses to deliver data pipelines at scale. A data engineer would be responsible for maintaining data flows that fuel into the enterprise. So a typical enterprise would probably have an ERP platform. You could probably be having another platform which is processing your application logs. You could probably be having another platform which is collecting your financial payments. So all these different facets of data, the data engineer is responsible for making sure that all this data is collected and maintained in a way that the business can make use of it. And they will be responsible for supplying the data sets to support the data scientists.
Yeah, hello.
So that
not
yeah, go ahead.
at you, but we have some few minutes, so
Okay.
we could just run through. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll quickly run through this. I think we're almost getting to the end. So like I said, data science is at the mercy of data engineering. You can't do data science if there's no data. If you get hired to be a data science in an organization where there's no data, then you can guess what that means. Who's going to be the data engineering? The data engineer. It's going to be you. Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. I'm not going to read into the tools that you need to have. We'll have a PDF file that we'll share, and you can be able to look into the skills that you need to have as a data engineer. I'll quickly also run through the machine learning engineers. So basically, machine learning engineers take whatever data scientists have created. So probably a data scientist has created a tool that is able to predict, like I said, customers who are likely to, what is it called, like default on their loans. And what a machine learning engineer will do is that they will actually help scale that tool. And what they would do is that they would be constantly training the data, and ensuring that that predicative tool is able to derive value that the business is looking for. So they basically ensure that the tools or the predicative tools or models that a data scientist has created are maintainable and are also scalable. That's pretty much what they'll be doing. And these are some of the skills that a machine learning engineer would require. That's a summary of the data roles. I won't go into it because I've pretty much talked into it. I think I'll quickly go into what are some of the tips that along the way I've gathered that I think would be great for you to get started on a data journey. Tip number one, find out what intrigues you when it comes to data. What really interests you within the space of data? Is it data preparation? Is it coming up with metrics and insights? Is it building solutions? Or is it designing and coming up with data models? So find out what intrigues you. Take your time and think through and experiment and see what intrigues you. Tip number two, know what you're getting into. If you're considering taking a job, for example, as the head of data science, your first question always should be, who is responsible for making sure my team has data? If the answer is you, well, at least you know what you're signing up for. Then, sorry. The third tip is, even if you've studied all the data things, there are not enough hours in the day for one person to do everything alone.
Yeah.
I think that's a self-explanatory message. So I think that's the, there's a tip number 4, sorry. My last final one, let me just finish on this one and I'll be done, is read articles. I personally really like Medium. They have a category on Medium that's called Towards Data Science. There are a lot of really, really good people who share personal experiences of how they go through about dealing with their data issues. People have advice on career, projects that they've worked on. I think it will give you a broader perspective of the data field that you feel would be suitable for you. So thank you so much.
Wow, thank you very much, June. It's really, really an enlightening presentation. We've learned so much about the data team, and I mean, most of us probably must have heard of just data scientists, data analyst, but this has been like a real eye opener, and I've loved every single bit of it. I know most of the community I've enjoyed the presentation as well, and there's some funny and brilliant analogy that people are thinking about when it comes to a data engineer and a data science and a scientist, and how those two members complement each other's work. And yeah, that's really brilliant. We'll move quickly to the Q&A session, and then if anybody has a question, I think you can put up your hand first. But then I'll read the first question that was already asked by one of our community members before the session.
Okay.
So quickly, so we have Susu, and Susu is asking, at what point can you identify yourself? Sorry, I think Okay, so let's move to Emmanuel. Oh, okay. Alfred is asking, what are the challenges you face in your journey to becoming a data engineer? What has been the obstacles so far?
So my first challenge, I think, is something I mentioned. For most of us or people who are my peers who probably studied computer science and computer engineering like 10 or 15 years ago, you can calculate my age when I say that. We really did not have a course like data engineering and data science. The only thing we were taught was databases and how to run MySQL queries.
Yeah.
So pretty much for a lot of us who've come from back then, who probably studied computer science and computer engineering quite a while, we've had to evolve into this role. So I literally had to teach myself. I had experience coding in Python, but I'd never ever seen pandas in my life before. I had to teach myself how to do that. And so I think the biggest challenge I've faced within the data engineering field is that it's not a role that existed within the technical space. It's a role that has kind of evolved within the technical space. So there's been a lot of struggle in trying to clearly identify what exactly it is and what's the niche. But I think right now things are getting clear on that part.
Brilliant. We have Marcelinus, and he's asking, how do you do it without fears? And looking at your story, you started with relatively no background. So how do you still become that brave and say, I'm going to do it anyway without fears?
Number one is believing in yourself. I'll be very honest with you. When I was given the role to be the data engineering manager, so let me just be honest with you. One, I'd never interacted with pandas in my life. I actually learned pandas on the road. I figured out everything within the role in terms of what was required and what was needed. And I think you just need to have that confidence within yourself. And then also make sure you have mentors. I think one of the things that I really, really got a lot of support from was my mentor, because I would go to my mentor and speak to him about my fears. I'm like, I'm not really sure how I'll figure this out. I feel like I'm not ready for this. And he would tell me, check these resources, check on this and that. So just believe in yourself and also have at least a community or at least 2 or 3 people who keep you anchored and keep you pushing. And read a lot. That's also the other thing, read a lot. Yeah. I hope that answers that question.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Stefan. I think we lost Stefan.
Okay. Sorry.
Yes. And he'll be back. Let me try to log in from the community account so I can.
Okay. Sure.
But you can, if you have any more tips to share, please go ahead, because as we are in this phase, we can keep the conversation going. So please go ahead and share your tips.
Yeah. So I was just sharing my tips that one, you need to have confidence in yourself and then ask questions. One of the things I realized, especially within a lot of young people who are trying to get themselves and grow within the tech field, is that they're afraid to ask questions because they feel that if they ask questions, they look daft. So this is one thing I always say about being within the tech field. The tech career is the career that will always keep you humble, because within tech, every day there's a new technology. Right now, as we are speaking, there's a new technology that has come out that you have no idea about. So you'll never ever know everything. Ask it. Even if it sounds dumb, ask it. Ask. I always tell my team that ask me even the dumbest question that you think is dumb, because my responsibility is to make sure that you understand it. And next time you have the capability to actually tackle that question by yourself and tackle it confidently. So don't stop asking questions.
I have a question. My question is, can someone transition from data analytics role to become a data engineer, and what are some of the hurdles they may encounter?
Yeah, absolutely. You can transition from being a data analytics person to a data engineer. I actually had someone in my team who did that, who transitioned from data analytics to data engineering. And number one is you need to have the interest, first of all. The other thing is that you need to take away the fear that you getting into data engineering, you'll have to code and coding is hard. No, coding is not hard. And I'll actually say coding, especially within the data space, is not hard. Because it's quite definitive in how you need to go about approaching information. So it's possible. You just need to develop an interest in the tools that are required for you to do data engineering. So you need to probably teach yourself a bit more of Python, and you need to understand how to work with tools like data warehouses and how to create data pipelines that can process information into various tools. So it is possible for you to transition from data analytics to data engineering. Yeah.
Thanks. I think Stefan is back now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
thank you. Had a bit of a glitch, but we have Williams. Williams is asking, is data engineering just primarily based on extract, transform, load, or there is more to it?
There is more to it. It's not only extraction, transformation, and loading. Extraction, transformation, and loading is just the part of you doing. It's more of like you transforming the data, right? It's more of you doing the data preparation. That's data preparation. There's also you maintaining the data pipeline. So in addition to that, there are tools that you're using to maintain your data pipelines. So probably you could be working with tools like, let's say, Airflow to maintain your scheduler. You'll also be dealing with things like maybe you're extracting logs as you're processing that information, and someone wants to probably create an automated report from the tools that you've extracted, right? You could also be involved sometimes in some roles. Some data engineers are involved in maintaining the servers, like the data warehouse servers, and maintaining the infrastructure that actually manages the data engineering process. So it's not only extraction and transformation and loading of data. There's a whole lot more that you can do. Especially as the organization is scaling and the data keeps growing, you'll realize there's a whole lot more that you'll be doing aside from just extraction, transformation, and loading. Yeah.
Great. So we have a very interesting question for Emmanuel, and I'm also interested in this as well. Are there opportunities for data engineer from Ghana? Like from Ghana, in Ghana here, what is the job market like for data engineers?
So my personal observation is that the market is there, but then there's also a bit of a problem. Like I said, most organizations have not figured out what a data department looks like. That's one of the challenges. So some people think, like I said, you meet someone and they tell you, I want a data scientist. But when you go and assess the organization, what they actually need is a data analytics person, because they only have data, maybe that is just being stored in an Excel sheet, and you just simply need someone to analyze that data for you. Or someone says they want a data scientist, but like I said, they have not figured out how to manage their data yet. Their data is not even in a form that a data scientist can use. So the opportunities are there, but I would say the challenge is also that organizations are still trying to find out what exactly does having a data department look like. So I think more likely, the places where you're more likely to get more and more data engineer roles is a lot of startups that are coming up have data engineering roles, because I think a lot of startups that are coming into place, especially like Fintech startups, they pretty much seem to understand what is the aspect of a data engineering role. And there are also remote roles where you'll find they're looking for data engineers. So you can also apply for such roles if you're interested in doing a data engineering role. But I think within the market, it's still growing. That's what I would say. It's still growing.
Thank you, June. Let me move quickly to the next question.
Mm-hmm.
Isaac is asking, how long would it take, averagely, to master data science? Is there an average number of hours, months, weeks, years?
I wouldn't say there's a time it takes you to master. I would say it matters with the kind of environment you're in and how much data you're being exposed to. Again, like I said, you remember that analogy I used where an ex-academician, whom I said, let's assume is a professor, went and he was told to be a chief data scientist, and he discovered that there was no data in that organization. And there's also something I said that if you take up a job as a data scientist and you go to that organization and ask them where's the data and they tell you they don't have it, you can guess what? You will not be a data scientist first. You will start becoming a data engineer. So it will take you time to actually become a master of data science. So that means that I think for you to be a master of data science, you need to be exposed in an environment, one, where there's a lot of data.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of projects that are going behind doing predictive analytics and building data models. If you're in a space like that and there are a lot of projects that are happening around that, then you probably become a master of data science because you're constantly being exposed to situations, you're being exposed to tasks and projects that are actually allowing you to hone that skill. But if you're in an organization, like I said, where there's no data, you'll have to first of all pack the data science role, maybe do the data engineering for 2-3 years. After they've collected some data, then maybe now start thinking about becoming a data scientist.
Very interesting. I'm going to go to this question, and then I am also interested because I have no background in data engineering and or data science, and you guys asking how do you start with, or whether you have a background in data science or you don't have a background, how do you start?
Like so I'll say something that I said, how do you start? First, it's curiosity. Are you someone who's always curious about how things look like? For example, even just the way you think, like maybe you go home and you're like, on Monday when I came here, the size of the sugar bowl was at this level. Where has it suddenly gone down? So like you need to be someone who's curious around things that happen around you. And then you also need to be intrigued. If you're already in an organization, maybe you're not a data scientist, you're just working in a different department. You also need to start showing interest. For example, let's say you're working in a, let's just assume you're working in an organization and you're not even in the data role. Maybe let's say you work in the call center, you're maybe a customer care person, or you're just someone who's doing a role that's completely detached from data. You can start showing interest maybe by asking someone, if there's someone within your data department, like, hey, can you walk me through how you come up preparing this data? Or how do you go about running your SQL scripts? Can you expose me on how to do certain things? So the interest needs to be there. And then also engage. The other thing I also usually encourage people to do is go around and maybe find blogs around people who do things like this, things to do with the area that you're interested in. Go look at videos maybe on YouTube on how to get started on something like data and all that. I think such kind of materials also help to create some form of inspiration behind you, like, okay, so if I get into this kind of role, this is what the field is going to look like. This is what I'm going to be exposed to. And then I think bit by bit, that helps you to get started and gives you the confidence to know that this is what you really want. Yeah.
Thank you very much, June, on that. We'll take just one more question, and then we can bring things to a close. So I have one final question from Pramond, and then he's asking, how do I develop a mindset of a data engineer? He's a data analyst. I'm trying to become a data engineer, and then he often struggle with how data engineers approach solutions. So also would love to hear about various technologies used in that space, technologies to start mastering or learning whilst you are trying to transition from a data analyst to a data engineer?
So on the presentation that I shared, I've already shared it with Kafu. There's a PDF file that I think if anyone is interested, Kafu will share with you. I list over there the kind of skills or tools that you need to have for you to be able to perform data engineering. So first and foremost, you definitely need to have Python on your bag for you to be able to perform that. You need to be great at SQL query writing. And then in addition to that, there are tools that are used in data engineering. So you'd probably be exposed to a data warehouse. You'll probably be exposed to tools like Airflow or Luigi, some of these tools that are used. So you need to familiarize yourself with the tools that are used in data engineering. You need to familiarize yourself with the language. Python is one of the core languages, but I'm sure you can still do it in other languages like R, although R right now is not commonly used. It's mostly used by statisticians. And then for that person who's a data analyst, I don't know what type of organization the person is in, but if he or she is in an organization where there's some data engineers, I would encourage the person to probably find some time to spend with the data engineers. And even one of the things I used to tell my data analysts who are interested in doing data engineering, I would tell them, reach out to a data engineer and see if they can give you just a small project for you to do. Maybe that project may take you 3 or 4 days to do, but tell them, do you have a small task that you can give me to assist you? And that way you begin building your skills and see whether it's an area for you that you'd want to have interest on. And then bit by bit you'll grow. That's how one of my data analysts moved into data engineering. We started giving him like small bits of projects, and that way the person was able to build their skill capacity. That's how it
Great. Yeah. We have just one more question from Kennedy in a Q&A. And then Kennedy is asking if you recommend any blogs or write-ups that he can follow up with on data engineering.
Oh, I've seen, okay. It will be, I'm actually thinking of doing writing. I have some articles I've written, but I've never published. Wow, this writing stuff is not easy. Hands down for all bloggers and content creators. But yeah, I definitely want to start writing because I feel there's a lot I would definitely love to share with people that I've experienced through my data journey. In my last, what is it called? In my last part of the presentation, I mentioned Medium. There's a category within Medium articles that's called Towards Data Science. Yeah. And people really write very good blogs. Like there's a certain lady that I follow. She's from Google. I just love her articles. Like, she's hands down one of my favorite data writing article people, whatever it is. So Medium is one of the places I've found. I think there are other places you can get that people write articles on data, but the best I have personally come across so far is Medium. Although if you want to have access to a lot of the articles, it's not free. It is $5 for every month. Yeah. So, or maybe if you want, you can create an account where you share with your friends and share that $5 among 3 or 5 people, and then you'll all have access to it if you can't afford to spare $5 every month.
That's very brilliant. Wow, it has been a wonderful session. Thank you very much, June, for doing this with us. There's so much knowledge, so much insight going on, and I have personally enjoyed this session. I am also curious about data and how to enter it as a data scientist or a data analyst. Then before we close, we can take one more question. Hi, Samira. She put up her hand.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I was muted elsewhere as well. Yes, I was saying that was an error, but I'll still ask my question. Is June open to mentoring anyone for getting into data engineering? because I have someone who wants a mentor, but I haven't found someone for her yet.
Well, I believe June would be on the Kraado coach program.
Yeah, I'm on the
If
Kraado coach program. I think it's possible. I have to also though say that the mentorship thing is usually not quite easier. One, because a lot of times when people usually come for mentorship, you tend to find that they haven't really prepared their mind on what exactly they want. So I'm very open to assisting anyone who wants to find their niche around the data engineering path or whatever data path you feel you want to be guided to. But one thing I would recommend is that find out exactly what you want and what kind of support exactly are you looking to get. Because even if you have someone mentoring you, but you don't have a clear vision or picture of where you want to get to, the person may try to offer their support, but you might not also get as fulfilled because you don't have a clear objective of why you want to do what you want to do. So for anyone who's looking to be mentored, I'll always say, find out what the objective behind your mentorship is, and what you're interested in. Maybe you're aspiring to be, I want to be a data engineer in this area. Some people even want to be data engineers in specific fields. I know people who have a specific field they're aiming. Some want to be data engineers in the medical field. Others want to be data engineers maybe in things to do with blockchain and all that. So really, really take your time and understand where exactly do I want to find my niche. And I think that usually helps even a mentor to direct you to the right place. Maybe they can direct you to certain materials that will be beneficial to you, or maybe even to someone else who might be of benefit to you. So yeah, definitely open to it.
Okay, thank you very much, guys, for being with us. We loved having you guys, and June, again, thank you very much for doing this with us. We appreciate you. I'm sure the community is taking a lot from you today. So I'd like to say thank you, everyone, and then we will see you on the next Kraado Learn session. Bye.